Chapter 1. The Encounter. The universe was vast, filled with stars that had burned long before any of the civilizations they now carried had even dreamed of existence. In the middle of this infinite expanse, planets spun, each holding life, each with its own stories, but none more compelling than that of Nara, a young alien from the planet Purrs. Her species was known for their delicate features, ethereal skin that shimmered with the light of their twin suns, and a deeply ingrained sense of reserve that dictated their interactions. It was a society built on silence, understanding, and unspoken bonds. The concept of direct, physical touch was as alien to them as the idea of love through mere words. Relationships, if they could even be called such, were subtle, more about shared glances and the feeling of connection than anything overt or passionate. Yet, as Nara stood aboard the great ship that had brought her to Earth, she felt an unfamiliar stirring deep within her. The sensation was foreign, like an itch she couldn't scratch, a tension that tightened with every passing moment she spent near him. His name was Ethan, a human from Earth, a creature so unlike the quiet, graceful beings of her planet. He was loud, unrestrained, and his presence was enormous, as though it stretched beyond the very space he occupied. The first time she had seen him, she had felt a rush of warmth flood through her. His broad shoulders, the way his muscles rippled beneath the fabric of his clothes, she had never seen anything like it. The sheer scale of him was overwhelming. He was strong, powerful, but there was something in his eyes, a tenderness, a softness that made Nara feel both intrigued and confused. She wasn't supposed to feel this way. Her people didn't feel in the ways that humans did. They were supposed to be above such carnal desires, their relationships built on mutual respect and understanding, not the overwhelming attraction that seemed to surge within her every time she was near him. Nara had tried to avoid him, tried to remind herself that this was a simple diplomatic mission, a cultural exchange that was never meant to be more than a study of their differences. Yet, every time their paths crossed on the ship, her heart raced, her skin flushed, and she felt the subtle pull of his presence like a magnetic force she couldn't resist. He had been kind to her, attentive in ways that confused her. He asked her questions about her culture, about her life, and yet, it was the way he looked at her that drove her to distraction. His gaze was not one of curiosity, but of admiration, of something deeper that she couldn't begin to understand. It was during one of these encounters, as she found herself standing beside him in the observation room, looking out at the swirling colors of nebulae and the distant stars, that she felt the change in the air. Ethan had casually placed his hand on the railing beside her, and without thinking, Nara had placed her own hand next to his. The warmth of his skin sent an electric jolt through her, and her breath hitched. The touch was nothing more than a simple gesture, but to her, it felt like the most intimate thing she had ever experienced. The space between them seemed to shrink, and Nara could feel her body betraying her, her pulse quickening, her breath coming shallow. "What's it like? Where you're from?" Ethan asked, his voice low, his eyes focused on the stars, but there was something in the way he spoke that made Nara's heart beat faster. She knew what he was asking, the deep, underlying question of connection, but she didn't know how to answer it. How could she explain that her world didn't feel like his? That his touch, his presence, felt huge, overwhelming in a way she had never experienced before? That everything about him seemed to draw her in, while everything in her culture had taught her to keep her distance, to remain calm and composed? Nara's voice faltered, and she took a step back, suddenly aware of the space between them. "It's different. We don't touch. Not like this." She gestured vaguely between them, unsure of how to put her feelings into words. Her people valued emotional intimacy above all else, but physical closeness was considered a personal invasion, a violation of the space that each individual was entitled to. The idea of desiring someone physically was completely foreign to her, and yet, standing next to Ethan, she couldn't deny the surge of something warm and unfamiliar that ran through her at the very thought. Ethan's gaze softened as he turned toward her, his blue eyes gentle, yet filled with a hint of mischief. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said, though his voice held a playful undertone. "But I can't help noticing how different you are. You're so graceful, so otherworldly." Nara's heart skipped. He had no idea how right he was, but not in the way he thought. She was from a world so unlike his that even the simplest of gestures felt like an insurmountable chasm. Her people were serene, calm, and emotionally restrained, and she had always thought of herself as the embodiment of that. But here, with Ethan, her resolve was beginning to crack. She couldn't explain why, but his words and his closeness were driving her to the edge of something she didn't want to feel, something she shouldn't feel. She turned away, unable to meet his eyes, feeling a surge of heat rise in her cheeks. She had to get away, but the more she tried to pull back, the more the pull between them seemed to grow. It was as if her very resistance only made the bond between them stronger, more unavoidable. But she knew this wasn't right. She wasn't supposed to feel this. She wasn't supposed to want him like this. The sensation that coursed through Nara every time she stood near Ethan became harder to ignore. It was a warmth, a heat that she couldn't place, a feeling that went beyond the way his physical presence made her feel like she was standing in the sun. There was an undeniable force pulling her toward him, something that neither her culture nor her upbringing had prepared her for. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced, and it terrified her. She had been taught to maintain control, to never allow her emotions to overtake her in the way she now felt them bubbling up within her chest, threatening to spill over. For days, she grappled with these feelings, withdrawing further into herself with each passing moment. But no matter how much she tried to keep her distance, no matter how often she reminded herself that a partnership with Ethan was impossible, the attraction between them was undeniable. It wasn't just his size or the strength she could feel emanating from him, but the way he made her feel alive, like something deep inside her that had been dormant for centuries was waking up, stretching out, demanding to be felt. In the hours when she couldn't escape his presence, Nara would find herself fixating on the way Ethan's eyes softened when he looked at her. He wasn't trying to push her, never forcing her into anything. His understanding was overwhelming, and it made her feel even more conflicted. Here was a human wild, untamed in ways her species could never comprehend, yet he treated her with a gentleness that left her breathless. It made her question everything she had been taught, and everything she thought she understood about attraction and connection. One evening, as the stars outside the ship shone brightly against the velvet darkness of space, Ethan approached her once more. She was standing near the observation deck, gazing out into the void, her thoughts a swirl of confusion and longing. She heard him before she saw him, his footsteps slow and deliberate, the familiar weight of his presence filling the air between them. She turned slowly, and there he was, standing in the doorway with that same soft smile, his gaze as steady and kind as ever. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, she felt trapped in the raw intensity of the moment. "I didn't mean to disturb you," he said quietly, stepping into the room with a calmness that contrasted with the storm swirling inside her. "I just thought, maybe we could talk. I've been noticing that you've been distant. Is everything all right?" Nara struggled to compose herself, the words catching in her throat. The truth was, she didn't want to talk. Not yet. Not until she could find the words to explain the strange, terrifying emotions she was battling inside her. But as his eyes met hers, she couldn't bring herself to lie. "I'm just not used to this," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper, betraying the vulnerability she felt in that moment. "I'm not used to feeling this way." The honesty in her words seemed to stir something in Ethan, and he took a slow step closer, as though giving her the space she needed while still bridging the gap between them. "You don't have to explain yourself to me, Nara," he said softly. "But if you ever want to talk, I'll listen." Nara felt a wave of emotion rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to feel this way about him. Her people had no room for these kinds of feelings: attraction, desire, longing. Yet here she was, caught in a web she didn't know how to escape. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide from this strange new world of emotions and yearnings that seemed to flow from her every pore when she was near him. But as Ethan reached out and gently placed a hand on the railing next to hers, the simple, subtle touch sent a shock through her body. It wasn't just the warmth of his skin. It was the sensation of connection, something that, for the first time, felt right. She closed her eyes, unable to look at him, as if by doing so she could shut out the overwhelming pull she felt in her heart. Chapter 2. The Struggle Within. The days that followed were no easier for Nara. The more she tried to distance herself from Ethan, the more intense the pull became. She had thought that avoiding him would quell the strange feelings surging through her, but it only made them worse. When she saw him from across the room, when his voice reached her ears, it was like an electric current shooting through her. His presence was inescapable, and no matter how much she tried to focus on her responsibilities on her mission, she couldn't help but be consumed by him. It was as though her entire being was at war with itself. Her instincts, honed over years of discipline and cultural teachings, screamed at her to remain aloof, to keep herself distant and detached from the human. The very concept of intimacy, of physical closeness, was foreign to her species. But there was another side to her, one that no longer listened to the rules that had governed her life for so long. There was a longing now, a deep hunger to feel something more than the emptiness she had carried with her all her life. With every passing day, the yearning grew stronger, and with it came the crushing realization that she couldn't resist much longer. One evening, she found herself in the ship's common room, alone with her thoughts. The stars outside the windows glittered like diamonds, and the hum of the ship was the only sound that filled the space. Her eyes closed as she leaned against the window, letting the quiet wash over her. She had to focus. She had to remain in control. But the sound of footsteps broke her concentration, and she turned to find Ethan standing just a few feet away. He was looking at her, his expression gentle, almost as though he were waiting for her to say something, to make a decision. For a long moment, they simply stood there, the air between them thick with unspoken words. "I know this isn't easy for you," Ethan said softly, his voice filled with a tenderness that made Nara's heart ache. "But you don't have to do this alone. If you need time, I'll give it to you. But I can't stand by and watch you fight yourself. You deserve to be happy, Nara. You deserve to feel everything." Nara took a shaky breath, her chest tightening as she struggled to hold back the overwhelming flood of emotion that threatened to consume her. His words were both comforting and terrifying. Feel everything. She had never allowed herself to feel anything so raw, so untamed. Her culture had taught her to keep everything tightly bound, to suppress any desires that threatened to break through the surface. But Ethan was different. He didn't expect her to be perfect, to be controlled. He simply wanted her to be, and that scared her more than anything else. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, the words slipping from her lips before she could stop them. "I don't know how to let go." Ethan took a step forward, his hand extending, but he stopped just short of touching her. "You don't have to let go all at once. I'm not asking for anything, Nara. I'm just asking that you don't push me away." For the first time, Nara's resolve cracked. She looked at him, really looked at him, at the kindness in his eyes, at the depth of his feelings. And in that moment, she knew that her life would never be the same. With a shaky breath, she closed the distance between them, her heart hammering in her chest. For the first time in her life, she let go of everything she had ever known, allowing herself to be pulled into the warmth of his embrace. Nara's heart raced as she stood there, inches away from Ethan. The air between them was charged, as though every molecule in the room had become aware of their proximity, of the undeniable pull they shared. She could feel the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his breath, and for the first time, Nara allowed herself to stop thinking, to stop analyzing, and simply feel. His hand hovered just above her shoulder, as though he were waiting for her to take the next step, to give him permission to close the gap that had been building between them since their first meeting. The vulnerability in her heart threatened to break through the dam she had spent so long constructing. She had never been this close to someone before, not in this way. Her people valued the bonds they shared with others, but they did so from a distance. Touching, intimacy, these were things that were reserved for the private sanctuaries of the soul, not for physical bodies. But as she stood before Ethan, the world of Purrs felt a lifetime away. The quiet, reserved life she had known was being consumed by a force far stronger than anything she had ever anticipated. It was all because of him. Ethan stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers, his presence overwhelming, but not in a way that made her feel trapped. No, it was comforting, like being wrapped in a warm blanket after a lifetime of cold. His hand finally rested lightly on her shoulder, a gentle touch that was as much a question as it was an invitation. "Nara," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to say anything, but if this is something you want, you don't have to be afraid. You're not alone in this. I'm not here to push you. The tenderness in his words made Nara's resolve falter even more. She wanted so badly to reach out, to allow herself to be enveloped by him, to feel the connection she had never known before. But her mind kept fighting against it, reminding her of the things she had been taught. Her heart, on the other hand, was screaming at her to take that leap, to trust him, to allow herself to be vulnerable in a way that was so foreign to her. For a long moment, Nara said nothing. The only sound was the soft hum of the ship's engines in the background, the distant stars twinkling outside the window, as though they too were waiting for her decision. She could feel the heat of Ethan's touch seeping into her, and it was as though every inch of her being was alive with the energy between them. She had never known such a feeling, one that made her want to cry, to laugh, to scream out loud in joy and confusion at once. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to do this, Ethan. I've spent my whole life learning to suppress everything I feel. My people, we don't." Her words trailed off, and she swallowed hard, trying to make sense of the chaos inside her. Ethan's expression softened even more, and he gently cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin in a slow, soothing motion. "It's okay, Nara. You don't have to know everything right now. All I'm asking for is a chance. A chance to show you that you don't have to be afraid of what's happening between us. You don't have to shut yourself off." Nara closed her eyes at his touch, her breath coming in short, uneven gasps. His words, his touch, it was everything she had ever wanted, and yet everything she had been taught to avoid. The emotions that swirled inside her were overwhelming, but they were also beautiful, a promise of something more, something real. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," Nara whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "I just don't know how to stop." "You don't have to stop," Ethan replied softly, his voice filled with such certainty and tenderness that Nara felt a shiver run down her spine. "Let me show you, Nara. Let me be the one to help you through this. Let me be the one to make you feel safe enough to let go." Nara opened her eyes then, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel the need to hold herself back. She reached up, her hands trembling slightly, and gently placed them on Ethan's chest. His heart beat beneath her palms, steady and strong, a rhythm that soothed her and brought her closer to him. And in that moment, all the doubts, all the fears she had carried for so long began to fade, replaced by the undeniable truth that this was where she was meant to be. With a slow, hesitant motion, Nara leaned in, her lips brushing against Ethan's for the first time. It was soft, tentative, as though they were both afraid to take the next step, but the spark that ignited between them was undeniable. The kiss deepened as Nara let herself fall, no longer fighting the overwhelming pull between them. Ethan's arms wrapped around her, drawing her closer, and for the first time in her life, Nara allowed herself to feel completely and utterly alive. Chapter 3: The Reckoning of Desire. In the days that followed, everything seemed to shift. Nara found herself thinking about Ethan constantly, replaying the moments they had shared over and over in her mind. She had crossed a line, a boundary she never thought she would cross, and now there was no going back. The kiss they had shared was not just a kiss, it was the beginning of something deeper, something that both terrified and excited her in ways she couldn't explain. Every time she saw him, her heart fluttered uncontrollably, and when they spoke, their words felt like a secret exchange, one that only the two of them truly understood. Ethan was kind, patient, and never pushed her further than she was willing to go, but Nara could feel the pressure building within her. She was caught in a whirlwind, and the closer she got to Ethan, the more she realized she didn't want it to stop. There was a hunger inside her, a longing for more, but it was a hunger she had never been taught to acknowledge. Her people didn't have desire like this. They didn't have the yearning for another being that seemed to claw at her from the inside every time she was near Ethan. But it wasn't just about physical attraction, it was something more. Ethan had shown her kindness, had made her feel things she had never experienced, things she had never allowed herself to feel. Her culture had taught her to suppress every instinct, every emotion that could lead to instability or chaos. But now, as her feelings for Ethan deepened, Nara found herself questioning everything she had ever known about herself and the world around her. One night, as they stood together on the observation deck, looking out at the stars, Nara felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. The beautiful glow of distant suns seemed to mock her so far away, so indifferent to the turmoil inside her. She felt Ethan's presence beside her, his warmth, his steady breathing, and for the first time, Nara wasn't afraid. She had always believed that her people's way was the only way, that love and desire were things to be avoided, things to be feared. But now, in the quiet of the universe, she realized something: she didn't want to avoid it anymore. She wanted to feel it, to experience it with Ethan. "Ethan," she whispered, turning to face him. "I don't know what this is, but I don't want to fight it anymore." Ethan smiled softly, his blue eyes filled with understanding and affection. "You don't have to fight anything, Nara. You're not alone in this." And for the first time, Nara allowed herself to let go completely, to embrace the possibility of a life she had never imagined. The stars outside continued to burn, indifferent to the changes unfolding within her, but Nara knew that from now on, her path would never be the same. As the days passed, the tension between Nara and Ethan only deepened. What had started as a simple connection, something fleeting, perhaps soon became an undeniable bond that neither could deny. Nara, once so guarded and composed, found herself opening up in ways she had never imagined. Every conversation with Ethan felt like peeling back another layer of herself, exposing emotions she had spent her entire life suppressing. It was thrilling, terrifying, and utterly consuming all at once. The ship's corridors, once familiar and cold, now felt different. When she walked down them, it wasn't the hum of the engines or the quiet footsteps of the crew that she heard. It was Ethan's voice in her head, his words echoing in the chambers of her heart. She could feel him in the space between them, like an invisible thread pulling them closer. And yet, despite the undeniable pull between them, Nara still hesitated. She had always known that there were consequences to living this way, giving into emotions and desires, letting them drive her choices. It wasn't just about her. It was about everything she had been taught, everything her species had valued. Her people didn't live for the fleeting pleasures of the body, and her connection with Ethan was so intense that it made her question whether she could ever return to the world she knew. One evening, as the ship docked on a new planet, Nara found herself alone in her quarters, staring at the stars outside the window. She was waiting for Ethan, hoping to find some clarity, some sense of direction in the chaos of her emotions. She had spent hours sorting through her thoughts, but every time she came to a conclusion, it was swept away by the weight of her feelings. Her entire life, her upbringing, had been about restraint. But now, everything she had known seemed to crumble in the face of what she felt for Ethan. She didn't know if she could handle this. The door to her quarters opened, and Ethan stepped inside, his familiar presence immediately filling the space. He looked at her with a softness in his eyes, his gaze not questioning, not pushing, but simply accepting. "Nara," he said softly, walking toward her. "I've been waiting for you to talk to me. I know this is confusing for you, but you don't have to do this alone. I'm here." She looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time, she realized that her hesitation wasn't born out of fear of what they could become. It was fear of losing herself in him, of losing the sense of control she had worked so hard to maintain. She had always been the one to keep her emotions in check, to remain composed, to never let anyone close enough to really know her. But with Ethan, that control was slipping, and in its place was something far more dangerous: love. "I don't know how to do this," she confessed, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't know how to let go." Ethan reached out, gently cupping her face in his large, warm hands. His thumb brushed her cheek, his touch so tender that it made her heart ache. "You don't have to let go all at once, Nara. Just take it one step at a time. We can figure this out together." For the first time, Nara allowed herself to believe him. She could feel the sincerity in his touch, the honesty in his words. He wasn't asking her to abandon everything she knew. He was simply asking her to trust him, to trust herself. And in that moment, something inside her did trust him. She let go of the last shreds of her doubt, allowing the emotions that had been building inside her to finally surface. As if on instinct, she stepped closer to him, her breath coming quicker, her heart beating louder. Without thinking, she reached up and pulled him toward her, closing the space between them with a kiss that was deeper, more desperate than any kiss they had shared before. Ethan responded immediately, his hands sliding to her waist as he pulled her even closer, as if he, too, had been waiting for this moment, this leap of faith. The kiss was a release, a surrender. Nara could feel her walls crumbling, the deep-seated fear of what this could mean dissipating in the warmth of Ethan's embrace. His body, so strong and solid, grounded her, making her feel safe in a way she had never felt before. She let herself lose herself in him, in the feeling of being loved and cared for in ways she had never believed possible. For the first time in her life, Nara felt free from the expectations, free from the restraints, free from the fear that had always kept her chained to the past. She was in this moment, in this connection, and she was no longer afraid of what the future might hold. Chapter 4. The Future Unfolds. The days after that night were a whirlwind of emotions for Nara. She had allowed herself to feel, to embrace something far beyond the quiet, composed life she had always known. And with Ethan by her side, she discovered something new, something that transcended the limitations of her species and her upbringing. They were different, yes. They came from different worlds, with different values, different ways of seeing the universe. But in the end, what mattered wasn't where they came from, it was the bond they had forged in the stars, a bond that was strong enough to defy the odds. Nara found herself more confident, more at peace with who she was becoming. She had always thought that love, attraction, and desire were things to be feared, things that could lead to chaos and destruction. But now, she realized they were also a source of growth, of connection, of understanding. She didn't have to be afraid of her emotions. She could let them guide her, let them shape her future. Ethan was there for her every step of the way, patient and kind, never rushing her, but always offering his support when she needed it. And as their relationship grew deeper, Nara began to see the beauty in the unknown, in the messy, chaotic nature of love. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. One evening, as they stood together once more, looking out at the stars, Nara felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The galaxy, with all its vastness and uncertainty, no longer seemed so intimidating. She had found something that transcended the boundaries of space and time, something that would endure, no matter where the stars led her. With Ethan by her side, she was no longer just a Tavares, a being bound by tradition and restraint. She was someone who had learned to embrace the beauty of love, of passion, of connection. And as she turned to Ethan, her heart swelling with everything she felt for him, she knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. The stars were theirs to navigate, and the universe, once so vast and unknowable, now felt like a place full of endless possibilities. And in that moment, Nara knew that she had found her place in it.